Hi, everyone. Welcome back to All Things Real Estate with Ari Wintraub. I'm very excited today to have a guest from Trammell Crow in a principal role, Alex Valente, who's going to speak in depth about his position at a large institutional development firm focusing in residential mixed-use projects. So without further ado, Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Ari. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for coming in Sunday morning so early.
Still waking up, but
Well, let's get into it. Wanted to start off, just give us your background, how you got to where you are now working in real estate at this large development company, one of the oldest, I understand, in America.
Sure. So I'm originally from the East Coast, from New York. Go Knicks. Grew up in New York City. College out in Connecticut, Trinity College, who actually won the national championship yesterday
Oh, wow.
in D3 basketball, which was pretty incredible. And then I did 2 years after that in Boston doing investment banking. I was doing technology M&A. I did not like it. From there, I went traveled the world a bit, came back, decided to become an actor. Did that for a decade. That's what brought me to LA. I was doing acting, producing, and then my day job was being a tennis pro. You're very, very standardized way into commercial real estate. Turns out one of my clients, actually a lot of my clients, were real estate developers. So I took an internship with this gentleman named Tom Safran, who's a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, who's got an office in Brentwood. He's one of the larger affordable housing developers in Southern California.
Okay.
So I started with him. That was about 15 years ago. And then I interned I went back to school, basically. I went back to UCLA, to Anderson, go Bruins. And then I interned for Tom. I interned for Wayne Rakovich, excuse me, who's one of the most sort of iconic developers here in Southern California. Also, he passed away about 2 years ago. And then I kind of, hustled my way into a job with Trammell Crow Company. And Trammell Crow Company is probably the most well-known development shop in the country. They've been around for 80 years.
Wow.
Headquartered in Dallas, Texas.
Right.
And for me, kind of a big deal for me was kind of coming out of business school and doing a big transition from entertainment, sports industry into real estate, was just to go work for the best firm I could find.
Right.
And it was 100% Trammell Crow Company.
Yeah, and I understand Trammell Crow, looking at their pedigree and their leadership, it's a lot of these, Ivy League and very, academic focused analysts who would maybe come up through, the ranks of real estate brokerages, and you kind of came in it kind of maybe through the side door in a way.
Yes and no. I would say, Trammell Crow, it's so funny. I guess we do have probably a decent amount of Ivy League folks. We do a lot of MBA recruiting.
Okay.
That's how I kind of came in,
Right.
through my MBA over at Anderson. And we hire a lot of MBAs from across the country into what we call these deal side roles. But I don't
That's
really.
interesting. So a deal side role is it's for a specific project?
Deal side role basically means, because we're a development firm, so we do a ton of construction management on the types of projects that we build. So we've got folks that come in, who are from the contracting side, engineering side, architecture side, to help kind of manage the construction. But they work hand in hand with those of us, call it, who work more on the deal side, that are out there on the front lines trying to acquire sites, entitle sites for development. So we all kind of work together to, achieve a vision to build a great project.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we've got folks that come in from all walks of life. I actually, it's funny, I've never really thought of us as like an Ivy League firm, but we do hire a fair amount of Ivy League MBAs. I was not one of them. But it's been a nice, it's a great culture there. So it kind of works. I'd say for the most part, folks are just, work really hard, are really good people, and care.
Right. Great. No. Okay. So let's step back. So you're at this firm. You've been there now. How many years now?
Uh, 13th year now.
Okay. And so give us the overview of Trammell. What are they building? What's the structure? You said they're based in Dallas. How many employees? What are you guys
Sure.
building for yourselves? Or are you guys building for other people? Are you a contractor for hire?
Sure. So Trammell Crow Company dates back to the late 1940s. Trammell Crow, that was his name, and he passed away about 15 years ago. I never got a chance to meet him, unfortunately. He's sort of considered the father of speculative development, which is just the idea that, essentially if you build it, they will come,
Right.
versus, what I understand from, 80 plus years ago, a company would want a headquarters, so they would hire a developer to help kind of manage and develop a building specifically for them.
Right.
So Trammell's credited with essentially saying, "Hey, why don't we go out there and build a new speculative product and speculate that, hey, somebody will be there to lease it or buy it once we build it."
Oh, incredible. Because that's how real estate is now.
And now it's just sort of second nature. But back in the day, apparently, again, this is all kind of before my time. It was relatively novel. So the way we're set up is we are what's considered a merchant development shop. So essentially, we kind of come in on the development side, and we're on the front end of acquiring sites, entitling sites, leasing sites, whether they're for commercial office buildings, life science buildings, industrial or logistics buildings, or multifamily buildings,
Right. Which is your focus.
which is my focus here in Southern California.
Got it.
So we essentially kind of come and do the development. We generally work with, call it 30 plus institutional capital partners across the U.S., really across the world. And then once we create the value of, finding the site, entitling the site, building the site, leasing the site, we step aside, and we'll either exit through a third party sale, or we will be bought out from our partner. Or oftentimes we actually do a lot of fee development work, especially on the office side right now,
Mm-hmm.
where folks will actually hire us. I guess this is kind of before speculative development, essentially to kind of manage the development of the project, and they're paying us a fee.
Right.
So we kind of think about those dollars coming in as the kinds of dollars that keep the lights on.
Right.
Because it's great to have fee revenue, especially right now. We're having kind of call it a rough time in development with these high interest rates.
Right.
But we do that combined with a high level of investment. We've got about $1 billion of our own money out across the country.
Oh, interesting.
So we really do think of ourselves as developers with an investor mindset, and we kind of back that up given how much kind of capital we have out there ourselves.
Right. So opposed to looking for that third party sale and exit at the end of development, in this instance, there's the owner who's going to, hire you guys to develop it and then hand the keys over to him, and you guys are paid a fee.
That would be more what we've been doing recently on the
Right.
commercial office side.
Like you said, keeps the lights on.
Keeps the lights on. What I focus on is on the multifamily side. We haven't done any local. No, actually, we did a fee entitlement, but for the most part, we're on the principal side, on the investment side, on the ownership side, partnering up with LPs, limited capital partners.
And those sometimes might be the buyers, you said, where your partners will buy you out. Could be the limited partner finance people.
Yeah, so like they might, we may figure out a great opportunity, go develop it together. They know our model kind of going in. We're very transparent that we're going to exit at the end, and they may have a built to core strategy. They may have a fund that wants to own long term. They may have a fund that is actually sort of very aligned with us in terms of they want to get out too, and they want to do a merchant model on that project, and then we'll generally kind of go hire, what are usually kind of well known brokerages, to go sell our project and hopefully make a profit for our investors and for ourselves.
Right. What could be like the time length, for a project? Let's say, you guys are going to be the owners and with partners, develop it from the beginning, from entitling, putting the plans together,
Yeah.
building it, and then exiting at a third-party sale? What could be the length of that?
I mean, on average, I'd say, 4 to 6 years.
Okay.
Um, most of the projects that we build are generally in the 2 to 3 year range just to construct.
Right.
And then you might have a year of pre-development before that, kind of getting your drawings to kind of construction drawings where you can actually, use them to build your project. And
Right.
sometimes, at least for multifamily, on a 300 unit project, that you're generally looking at a year to lease it up.
Right.
So right there, you're at a year of pre-development, 2 years of construction, a year of leasing, and that's 4 years if everything kind of goes perfectly.
Right. Exactly.
And then before that, you could spend up to 10 years sometimes, like, entitling a project, depending on the city you're in.
Right.
Now, that's not generally what we want to do, but we've definitely done it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say one focus we've had recently, at least kind of where I've been focused personally in Southern California on multifamily development, is trying to buy entitlements, trying to buy projects that were previously entitled, kind of cutting out the CEQA process, the California Environmental Quality Act,
Right.
which is, it was created with great intentions, but it's sort of been a kind of a running punchline of a joke of how much it's delayed development and kind of retarded supply in California, Southern California, and Los Angeles.
Yeah, and that's a big issue here, and we're going to touch on that. Where you see, the housing and the lack of it, and the need for it, and what's helping and what's hurting. And it sounds like this has been an obstacle for you guys. And so picking up an entitled project and cutting out that maybe a decade of entitling it has been
In
attractive.
some cases, it is attractive. There's usually a higher cost involved with it. Generally, higher risk. Higher cost.
Right.
So it's like a cap rate. So I will say these last 2 years that we've kind of had this higher interest rate environment, the pendulum has kind of swung back the other way. So now we're actually doing a few projects right now where we are entitling projects, and that's a function of maybe it's not the worst thing to need a little bit of time to entitle a project to hopefully kind of come out on the other side in a place where you're in a better interest rate environment, a better cap rate environment.
Right. When you actually go to draw on the construction money.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause you're not needing as much capital and leverage when you're just entitling something.
Yeah, we generally don't use debt kind of on the super front end pre-development side. We'll typically kind of bring on a construction loan when we're ready to kind of spend the bigger dollars constructing the project.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And so, just to touch on the structure of that. So you guys have something entitled, you're at that, development phase with the plans and the city. What's the structure? So you guys have limited partners. Are you guys taking, bank financing, or is it all, funded privately?
Our typical development capital structure is, call it us as sponsor / developer investing, call it 5 to 10% of the equity. We generally bring in kind of one institutional partner, pension fund, investment shop, private equity fund to kind of come in and fund, 90 to 95% of the equity. And then, we're typically using bank financing on the leverage side. So we have a construction loan anywhere from 50 to 60, 62% loan to cost. And that's our, relatively simple, conventional capital structure on these ground up developments.
So you guys are like 5% of your own money in the deal. But then you have the fund, you said 95%.
95% of the equity.
Of the equity.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the bank will come in for 50% of the
50-60% of the total capital stack. Yeah.
Got it.
So if you have a $100 million deal, you might have $60 million of debt, and you have $40 million of equity. So maybe we come in at $4 million of equity, 10%, and our partners at $36 million of equity.
Got it. So, half the deal is financed with the bank, and then of the other actual capital, you guys might be 5% of that, and then there could be like 45% with a
Yeah, the total cap stack. Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
that's about right.
Yeah, so you're not overly leveraged, with financing where you're subject to the rates and those terms coming up because you have a good amount of capital in it.
I'd say what we focus on, is relationships,
Mhm.
folks that we've worked with before that, if things do come up, we kind of agree to work through things together. I think that's why we've been around for 80 years.
Right.
Um,
Even with, like, the banks.
even with the banks, we have tons of kind of repeat business. Things kind of come up in the development game. I mean, it's just kind of wild the number of things that kind of come up
Right.
over 4, 6, 10 years.
For sure.
So you definitely want to work with folks that kind of know and and trust you, and that we trust them, and we'll figure things out. Even going in, something's gonna kind of
Right.
happen.
Right.
So it's really kind of how you respond to it and how you work together to get there. So we really kind of prioritize working with folks that we know, that we worked with before, that don't freak out when something bad happens, and we just figure out a way to kind of get through it, kind of get through the obstacle.
Well, that's what's so unique about the scale and the size of these institutional projects. If a guy's developing, a 10-unit apartment building, you're vulnerable to, the rates and the terms of the bank.
Yeah,
These lenders, they want to work with you guys. They want your business, and so they need to be flexible if they want that
sure, but
relationship.
look, we're vulnerable also to, and we just try to do things and kind of manage risk as best we can. So we're vulnerable to high rates, and we might get a slightly lower rate call than maybe some other sponsors, just based on our experience, credibility, balance sheet. So Trammell Crow Company is owned by CBRE. That's a Fortune, 130 company, top biggest real estate services company in the world. That's our balance sheet. They do our completion guarantees. So that's a pretty, reputable backstop
Yeah.
to kind of what we do on our completion guarantees when we build the project. So because we perhaps are less risky from the bank's point of view when we
Right.
build a project, we might get a better rate.
Right.
We're often focused on getting term and getting extensions on
Yes.
our debt, and that's just a function of being around for 80 years and understanding that, hey, 4 or 5 years from now, when the term of the debt comes up, we don't want to kind of be vulnerable,
Yeah.
and we want an ability to extend loans without begging for forgiveness, because you never quite know what environment you're going to develop into 3, 4, 5 years in the future. So we're, today, 2025, thinking about, well, what's it gonna be like when we develop and deliver a project in 2028?
Right.
And you just, you put forecasts together, which are always wrong, and you try to foresee the future. But really, what you're trying to do now, from a risk perspective, is trying to de-risk it and kind of give yourself some optionality.
Yeah, brilliant. Makes sense. Okay, so what I want to touch on now is your housing journey. This is something that when I first met you, you had told me you had done. It started around the COVID time, and sort of, pulling back and, giving you just gave us a great understanding of the firm and how you guys, structure things and, what you guys are developing. And so you're from what I understand, you're working at this development shop building, these large, apartment building, luxury, housing projects. But you felt like a fraud because you didn't ever live and use and understand what it felt like to be in one of these projects. So how did that come about and when was it? And explain this housing journey that you took on.
Sure, sure. So maybe we'll use the word imposter.
Impossible.
Fraud's got a tough optic. Look, I came out from a kind of rather unconventional background into commercial real estate. Though I will say, this is one of the things I love about real estate, is like people come from all walks of life.
A hundred
Um,
percent.
so, but having come from this environment where it's like acting, producing, teaching tennis, living all sorts of crazy places in LA, just because you're just trying to get by when you're on that, call it in the entertainment field, to working for, a really kind of like, blue chip white shoe firm like Trammell Crow Company, out of my MBA. and I kind of fall into this role working and kind of being part of our multifamily team where we develop new buildings. And so, we would be developing buildings, designing buildings. I'd be in these meetings and we'd be talking about the space and experiencing the amenities and how you get from your car to your elevator to your unit and going through, clear heights and units and corridors and amenity spaces. And I basically kind of, since I moved to LA, I think I've been living in apartment buildings that were like 80 to 90 years old, walk ups, just it's kind of what most folks who come to LA kind of live in. There's a lot of like older product here.
Right.
And I just sort of felt that like I didn't have a great kind of first person, first principles perspective on the types of projects that we were developing. And I just kind of felt like an imposter. So I honestly don't even completely know what the origin of this idea was, but I was living in a condo at the time I'd bought. I kind of gut renovated it, and I was living in it. And it was great. It was actually this beautiful new condo that I really liked. But I was really focused on kind of like I'm like obsessed with real estate. I think it's like the funnest, greatest industry in the world.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with just getting to know every nook and cranny, every corner of it that I could think of, that I could understand. And I realized that, hey, I don't know. I don't really know what it's like to live in these buildings. So I was like, why don't I just go live in these buildings?
Right.
And so kind of put one foot in front of the other. And I leased out my condo for a year. And I'm like, let me just go. And I basically had committed to myself to, I'm going to go live for a year. And, and I could, at first I was like, I could live in a place for 6 months, but then I was like, but then, it's going to be like 3 years and, I'll only cover, 6 projects.
Right.
So I was like, let me go, let me kind of journal the whole thing, pay attention, take notes, for myself and to share. And I'm going to go live. And this is right around the time where they started kind of coming up with these, kind of not Airbnb, but they have all these kind of units like Blue Grounds and one of them where you can go live in a furnished unit, for a month minimum.
Right. They call it like midterm corporate housing.
Short-term leases, corporate housing, but they're not just for, corporations. But for me, that was actually a great way to kind of access all of these buildings across LA. So what I thought I'd do is I would combine living in different multifamily type building typologies. So whether it's a podium building where the apartments are on top of the parking, a wrap building, which we call, was when the apartments are essentially kind of built wrapped around a parking structure. So you basically kind of go from your parking stall, you walk horizontally across, towards your unit, and a high rise. And these are the kinds of buildings that we're developing. So I was like, I'm going to go live around LA. I want to go live in different typologies. I want to go live in all of our competitors' buildings.
Awesome.
And ours. And I really wanted to discover LA more.
Okay.
I had, kind of mostly been living between, mostly around the kind of like West LA, West Hollywood for, 15 years at the time. So I was like, let me go explore LA and live in a few neighborhoods that I've never lived in.
So it wasn't going to be just about a different type of a product, but it was going to be a different type of neighborhood. So when are we at? I thought it was around COVID that you started this.
So it was before COVID.
Okay.
I'll never forget that. So it was probably 2019 where I kind of leased out my condo, which was like on the edge of LA, Beverly Hills, and West Hollywood on Burton Way. And then I went and
walk us through each of them.
I think I moved first to Marina Del Rey.
Okay.
I feel like I knew the West Side, knew Santa Monica, Venice, but I didn't really know that much about Marina Del Rey.
Is that even LA?
That is LA. Yeah, it is LA. It is.
I'm joking.
Yeah, it's a part of LA County. It's on the water. Most of the land over there is on a ground lease actually with LA County. It's really kind of a fascinating place on the water. And I live in a UDR building. It's a publicly traded REIT. They had a building called the Jefferson.
Okay.
So I lived there.
And was this one of those
2 months.
wrap buildings, or was it
This was a wrap building.
Okay, so not a tower with the parking below.
This was a mid-rise building, and
Okay.
that's generally defined from like 4 to 8 stories.
Okay.
A mid-rise building
Which
with
we
a
have a lot of that in LA.
lot of that in LA, with a 6-level parking structure, and I think it was a 5 levels of apartments.
Right.
And one of my distinct memories of it was I would park, and I would, once I was in a furnished apartment, a blue ground apartment, I would park in the parking structure, and oh my goodness, it was a long walk to get to my
Right.
apartment.
Right.
Which I guess from a fitness hack perspective is a great thing. You get all these extra steps in.
Right.
But if you've got your groceries, my arms would be falling off again.
Sure.
Maybe a good fitness
Or if you
hack.
forget something at
Or if
home.
you forget something, and it felt like it was like a quarter-mile walk to get to my unit.
Right.
And look, for folks, when you're developing higher end housing, convenience is at a premium. It's something that's attractive to folks that are renting. These are the things that you really need to think about: is what's the distance from your parking stall
Right.
to the last corner unit on the other side of the project.
So that would go into your criteria when you're back in those conference rooms about developing a project.
100%.
Why would someone develop this kind of wrap style development that's a little bit more sprawled and spread out? What's the
Well,
need or the desire to do that?
I mean, sprawl's a lightning rod of a word, but what you find is that these wrap type projects, which are kind of one level up of density from like a garden style apartment, which is those kind of 2 and 3 story, sometimes 4-story walk up buildings,
Right.
usually with an elevator. Those are generally associated with quote unquote sprawl or the suburbs.
Right.
A high rise, you generally don't see a high rise like, near farmland, right? You see these in mostly urban areas.
Right.
So if you think about it, like they're really dense, and they essentially kind of fit more units into a smaller piece of land.
Right.
A podium is also a pretty dense project. It's 8 stories, up to 8 stories, at least in LA by kind of fire building codes. And, you might be able to get, 200 units on an acre. But again, it's usually associated with a more urban environment. And then a wrap building is usually less dense,
Right.
because you've got 5 stories of apartments, but now you're fitting a huge parking structure next to where the
Right.
apartments are. So it basically requires kind of more land.
Right.
So, right now we're building a wrap apartment building in Northridge, which
Okay. Which
I-
has more land opposed to somewhere like K-Town or downtown LA.
Exactly, and you're always kind of site specific, but Northridge was sort of traditionally a bedroom community, but it's becoming more dense. The valley's becoming more dense. LA's becoming more dense and being forced to kind of go up to kind of accommodate more people because we have a supply crisis here, really, a housing crisis. So all of these cities, really at the behest and at the leadership of the state, which are kind of focused on these sort of density incentives to encourage housing.
Right.
You're seeing LA kind of for the first time in maybe a long time kind of going more vertical.
Exactly.
So
Okay.
this was a wrap project I was living in the West Side,
Got it.
Marina Del Rey.
Yeah.
I wanted to live in it, experience it, because it's kind of like I grew up in New York City. The thought of like driving up 4 stories of a parking garage and then walking over to my unit doesn't really exist there.
Right.
So this was just kind of a really
It sounds like you
exciting-
weren't crazy about it.
Well, I wasn't crazy about this one specific project that I lived in
Okay.
on the West Side.
Yeah. It sounds like if like they had maybe worked in some features along the way. So between the units and the parking structure, there'd have to be like really nice water features, or you're passing by maybe the front desk.
That's
the pool.
absolutely a consideration.
Right.
Maybe not the simplest thing to do.
Sure.
In your kind of conventional wrap, and all these sites, there's always kind of weird things that you're always accounting for that you never realize till you're out there like trying to play Rubik's cubes with like your architecture team in building a project, and there's like easements and kind of weird site configurations. But thinking through the leasing path when someone enters your building from when they park and kind of what they see and what they experience is top of mind for us. Thinking through the experience of the resident when they walk into your building from maybe getting a coffee, from when they park in the building and access their unit on a day-to-day basis. I mean, those kinds of things directly impact like renewal rates.
Yeah.
And if folks don't like living in if you sell them on the dream of living in the building and they get there, then don't enjoy it, they're going to leave. And that's a way higher operating cost
For
to
sure,
turn
to
all
have
these units every
vacancy,
year.
100%. So
So
only through living there, experiencing that, did that become a factor for you. So then the next project you moved on.
I moved from Marina Del Rey, living in this, wrap typology on a very large site, to living to downtown. I had never lived in downtown before. This again is 2019 still, and I moved into the Emerson as a related project. Related, it's one of our competitors. They're a terrific developer builder.
They own
Well
Equinox.
respective. They own Equinox. And they had a beautiful high rise that I really liked living in called the Emerson. Right
That's
in
on
Bunker Hill.
Grand
Right on Grand, right near
by the museums.
the museum. And I actually loved living there. Spent a lot of time in downtown. Actually, really, really enjoyed living in downtown. Like, so much to do, so many great restaurants. It's been. I think downtown took a shellacking with COVID.
But actually, prior to that, so 2019, it was sort of like
It was
peak.
great. It felt like it was having a renaissance. We at Trammell Crow Company were investing in downtown, so I basically kind of went from this high rise, this related high rise in downtown in Bunker Hill, to another project in downtown LA, which was our project, La Plaza Village,
Okay.
which sat in El Pueblo,
Okay.
which is basically at the edge of Chinatown,
Right.
right near Union Station.
Right.
And that was a podium and a wrap project,
interesting.
all in one.
Okay. So how do you compare that to the related? How was the related experience? You're taking notes in the competitors. I understand related self-manages.
They
So they're their own,
self-manage, yep. And
front desk people and only
yeah,
and
and
staff.
for us, we hire, very professional third-party property management firms like Greystar, Saris, Regis, on all of our projects. So the property management stuff, you definitely notice it. I was taking notes on, like, how many people were staffed, how many maintenance people there were, how many porters there were, how many kind of leasing and community management staff there were. Really thinking through, well, what's the experience when I walk into the building? Because these are the kinds of things that we think about when we're putting together our operating budgets for
Right.
our projects. So it was really nice to be able to connect, call it the underwriting in the spreadsheets with what do I see
Right.
and experience with my own eyes.
Right, 100%. A spreadsheet might say you need this much budget for front desk staff, but you're like,
Exactly.
no, that's not enough. You need double that.
Not if you want to achieve these
Right.
these rents, for example.
Yeah.
100%. So I moved into our project, and that was that was an incredible experience.
So your third building now. You're like probably under 12 months.
Yeah.
Like living, on the road.
And I'm
essentially.
basically doing 2 months at a time of these projects, and that was especially good because I had worked on La Plaza Village since the moment we acquired the deal, which was a ground lease from the county of Los Angeles, all to benefact, is that a word? The La Plaza Museum, which is the first Mexican-American heritage museum in LA, which sat essentially across the street.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was very cool, a really cool story.
That was part of the project is helping.
Well, we were on a ground lease with LA County. We were essentially a sublessee, but basically our rent went to go pay for the operational costs of the museum, and still does.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, really cool. It was a great kind of public-private partnership, which we do a lot of those at Trammell Crow Company. We're doing another one right now in North Hollywood with Metro. Great ways to access sort of iconic, great real estate. It's kind of how I think about it.
Right.
So I lived in that project in downtown at the end of
What did you guys
2019, maybe
see?
even into early 2020.
Okay.
The timing I'll never forget
Right.
because we're kind of coming up to
Totally.
March of 2020.
Yeah. What were you noticing from the project that you guys had built, spent a lot of time developing, that was working or what wasn't working?
I definitely noticed we were essentially kind of across 2 full city blocks. I definitely noticed that we were in downtown on 2 city blocks, which we eventually got a crosswalk built between them. The one thing I think that stood out to me was how many elevators that we had,
Right.
which is probably I might call it above market, and how many points of access we had to our environment around us, which is something that you really need to think about when you're developing project,
Right.
because having, call it public access on so many sides really kind of introduces lots of um, elements that impact the operations of a building.
Sure.
And
Interesting.
so many ways in, so many ways out. We had a very large security expense on the building because we're a Class A building, and we're downtown is had its challenges, but I don't think is a much
Right.
of a. It's not too
And if you have
too controversial descriptor.
no,
Even
not at
even
all.
before COVID. So just thinking through how you have to kind of keep a safe environment on on essentially 8 sides of 2 buildings.
Right.
Four sides per
Yeah,
building.
someone
It's a
opens
lot.
up a stairwell door to go walk the
Exactly.
door, they prop it open, and you have an issue.
Exactly.
Another resident wakes up and they see someone sleeping in the stairwell inside the property.
And and you can't have that. We would never have that. And I'd say that was probably the project that I probably learned the most on
Right.
in terms of like kind of what we do. That was the first project that I worked on when I started 13 years ago at
Right.
Trammell.
And that foresight from living in that building to realizing we don't want this many egress and entrance areas. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, there's different ways to think about it. It got us access to, a iconic site to do a really kind of a great public benefit in downtown for the museum. But every project you work on, you spend 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 years working on something, you're going to learn a ton. And you just try to, I like to think that you just try to apply every lesson learned to the next one. If something doesn't work on one project, you're like, well, let's do it a different way on the next
Right.
one. And it might not work again, but you're always just trying to get a little bit sharper, a little bit better, and stay at the pulse of what folks are looking for when they're going to go lease a unit. And that's something I kind of take great pride in, is really trying to get into the mindset of the renter. And they come from all walks of life, but just thinking through where they're coming from, where they work, if they're a couple, what might the job be? And that changed with COVID and work from home, and like how might a couple live and experience this project. I love going back to and just meeting people that live in our project and just kind of talking to them and hearing about what they like, what they
Right.
don't like, why they chose that apartment. It's fascinating. I'm super curious about it. It kind of makes it fun.
Yeah. So here you are, you actually put yourself in their shoes. Were you like in bed waking up and journaling, oh, like the smoke detector, position
I
is like obnoxious and these windows should be.
Bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%.
You must have been super annoying at that period in the project meetings because you're constantly like raising all these questions. You're like, who is this guy? Like, why doesn't he just focus on the numbers and like get us to the finish line?
Just shut the heck up.
Yeah.
Maybe. Um, Look, I think I was trying to experience it like first person as a renter, but also just taking notes and writing things down. I find like just the way I retain things, if I don't write them down, I just can't remember them.
Right.
So I would, I had this really kind of cool like measuring radar laser to like literally like think through like the dimensions of a bedroom, which
Right.
are the kinds of things that we design. I'm like, I don't really like living in a bedroom that is 10 feet by 10 feet. I
Right.
like
Let me measure
it's at
this
least
and
14
document
feet
it.
by 10 feet.
Right.
And ceiling height and clear height. And when you're in design meetings and folks are like, oh, we need to put a soffit in here. And some designer might be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we need this to
But then now you're
be
waking up in that
mechanical.
room and you're
And it
measuring.
feels claustrophobic. And when you walk into a unit, it doesn't feel great. And so like these
And only like living there and waking up there and having that measuring tool would give you that understanding. Because someone sitting, on CAD designing it, it's not the same experience.
and I think people understand when you walk into a room, it makes you feel a certain way. And I think, look, the design team, this is what they do for a day job. So I think they better than anyone kind of understand the dimensions. And we like to
Maybe
work
not.
with
Maybe you
folks.
from living in them
Maybe not.
actually. Yeah.
There might be somebody who's just kind of putting the dimensions together at a lower level, but that's why you have folks, hopefully these, the kind of the senior principals at these design firms that understand the experience.
But I don't
element.
think they lived in Bunker Hill in these apartments or in, Chinatown downtown. They've lived in their houses. And so here you are waking up, and experiencing
Sure.
it.
And I think that's what happens, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
there's this journey where you go from living in the old buildings with 6 roommates, and you level up, call it, to maybe, a nice you get privacy, you live by yourself,
Right.
a studio, one-bedroom apartment. and then you meet someone, you want to start a family, you want a yard. I mean, call it the quote unquote
Yeah.
American dream, which is very, very unaffordable right now all across the country. Um, and maybe over time you forget, I suppose.
Yes, you
And
do.
and I think what I was so excited about on this journey was just kind of being at the pulse of what we were doing, learning as I go. Ended up doing this for a year and a half into COVID. What's really interesting right now, I got married, I bought a house. Um, I'm actually renovating my house right now. Um, and I am gonna kind of almost restart the journey
Right.
because I've got 6 months
Right.
to not live in my house. And I'm actually in about 2 weeks, I'm gonna go move into our latest new development in San Pedro, at the southern tip of LA, kind of right across from the Port of Los Angeles, and I'm gonna go re-experience living in a blue ground apartment, one of our projects again, and I'm actually really excited to do it 3 to 4 years later
Right.
just to kinda see how it feels, how
Yeah.
it hits.
Okay, let's talk about that project. I know you lived in 2 other buildings, but, we're not gonna touch on those, but you went from downtown to Santa Monica. You were there during, the civil unrest period of, Black Lives Matter, and it was rioting in your building. You lived in that one, and then you went to, back to Hollywood, and you really got to experience and took a lot away from that time. And so now you're gonna go back out on the road, and you're excited to live in this new project. So where are you guys at with this San Pedro one?
So this is our 137 unit Vivo on Harbor project, right on the waterfront in San Pedro, which is just the most charming part of LA that a lot of folks don't know about. Right across from the port, which is the biggest port in the Western Hemisphere. They do about $3 billion a year is their budget. And they have invested heavily in the waterfront right there in San Pedro. They put $1 billion into what you can see with your own eyes over the last 20 years. And there's about $1 billion of development committed going forward,
Wow.
including a very, very well-known new project by the Rakovich Company and Jericho development called West Harbor that's in process right now. That's going to
Okay.
have a 6,200 seat amphitheater, padel courts, breweries.
So your tenants are not gonna be necessarily, you know, uh, dock workers. It's not necessarily gonna be
Well, they might be. I mean,
shipyard.
the longshoremen actually do quite well. This project. So where we are is we opened in mid-January. So we're in lease up right now. We're about 20% leased. We've got this amazing sourdough bakery pizza oven concept on the ground floor called Colossus, which is
That's interesting. So
it.
now you're only 20% leased up. This is a big thing for me with these mixed use projects throughout the city is I always feel that the retail is an afterthought. And my assumption with that is that, with these companies, getting permanent financing and having the deal stabilized does not require having the retail leased up. So I always assume they focus on the residential, they get that leased up, they go to permanent financing, and they don't need to make money on the ground leases for the retail. But in this case, that's not the case. You guys have this really cool retailer, and that's helping attract tenants, or
Oh my God, it is.
but you know what I mean? I always see these
I would say
buildings
no,
and the
well,
the retail's empty.
I'll say, like, nobody wants that, right? I mean, nobody comes into the project like, "Oh, I can't wait to build this mixed-use project with all this empty retail." That's
But it always
generally not the way the intentions are.
I
I
get
will say that I do think a lot of multifamily developers, they might not focus on it, and
okay.
so you've got, 98% of your revenue coming from the apartment, so it becomes an afterthought, and then it becomes potentially a less attractive space to an operator, to a
For
tenant.
sure, right.
I would say for us, on this great location on the waterfront, and it's really a kind of a great corner where you kind of enter into, the what's called the downtown waterfront arts district.
Okay.
It would have felt terrible
Right.
if we opened the building and just had this empty retail space there, and we would have positioned it around it and put some clever graphics up to make it not look empty, but,
Right.
I would have honestly felt like shame if we
Right.
had opened up without a great tenant there, but we hired a great retail brokerage team, that did a lot of work in San Pedro. And we spent an exorbitant and probably disproportionate amount of time thinking through the dimensions of the real estate of the retail on the corner. And it's about
Yes.
1,500 square feet. And we just spent a ton of time thinking through loading and how consumers would enter the space and how they would build out their space. And we brought in this great retail specific architect to work with us, who has operated about a dozen restaurants
So smart.
just to make sure we don't screw it up.
So smart.
And we got, I think, again, you always, probably to be better to be lucky than good, but we got this great tenant called Colossus. This is their third location. They have got one in San Pedro. They're from the area. They have one in Long Beach. And they
That's
opened
going
up.
to draw tenants.
And I will say, I think in the last 2 weeks, I look at we have these daily activity reports in our lease up. I'd say about 80% of our tours in the last 2 weeks have been from folks that were just walking by
Right.
or coming to Colossus.
It's open and they're drawing people in.
There
I love that you guys
so
are
many people.
thinking big picture like this. You're not being short-sighted. And you're right. It's about retention because you might get a tenant in there, but that thing lays vacant for 4 years. It's going to become boring. It's not as exciting. It's not as convenient.
It activates the whole space, the whole waterfront, the whole kind of gateway into this kind of waterfront arts district. And it's like a feel-good community story too, because they're local,
Yeah.
right? So they're doing a great job. They love being there, and I will say the community kind of loves them being there. So it's been a terrific experience in San Pedro, and we're going to be doing another project right now in San Pedro that we're working on, that we're designing right now, 1 block away.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's great. So as we kind of look to winding down things a little bit, I wanted to touch on something that I've noticed through knowing you. I met you at the tennis club. You mentioned that you play a little bit of tennis, but you're one of the better players of the club, and I've had the pleasure of hitting with you, and I've also had the pleasure of passing you in the morning or in the evening, and you're always like very busy, right? You always got like a ton going on. So it's sort of two prongs with this. Where I'm going with this is sort of one. I'll come back to the tennis thing, but it seems that although you're at like a really big institutional, publicly traded, backed company, it seems that you have a lot of autonomy in what you're doing because you're so busy. It seems that like you're taking on, your tasks and you're making your schedule. And I always kind of wonder, like as an independent entrepreneur, that seems like the way it is. You're a developer, you got these projects, you're your own boss. But even at a big company, it seems that you're taking on a lot and you're making your own opportunities and you're making your schedule, which is really jam-packed. So am I seeing that correctly from the outside, that you really do, even though you're just company, you have a chance to go in and make things happen for yourself, dictate the opportunities. You seem very committed to these projects, almost that you individually own them and you're not just an employee.
Look, I'd say, and I don't know how everybody works at every shop there is. Two things. I'll say two things. One, at Trammell Crow Company, it's a total meritocracy. I mean, it's totally about kind of like what you do, how hard you work, what you create.
Got it.
And I think that's an amazing thing in real estate, because there's lots of legacy owners who might own a company and you could go work for them, but you'll never kind of participate, and maybe never have true ownership.
Right.
I don't know, but at Trammell Crow Company, I think one of the things they do a great job of is saying, hey, if you come here and work your butt off, you essentially will kind of have a piece of this, and that's kind of what Trammell Crow Company was known for, was just this idea of partnership.
A piece of it in terms of like an equity stake.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different model now because we're publicly traded, but like we essentially kind of participate in kind of in the outcomes that we
Successes.
in the successes and and the failures if those happen.
Right.
So
So they incentivize you, and maybe that's why I'm noticing that you're just like all in it, like it's your own project.
but it feels like it's your own project. I'll say too, it also kind of changes with the role. So, when I first started, I actually tell this story out of MBA. um, I'm glued to my computer and I'm underwriting deals nonstop, 16 hours a day. Really, one, trying to learn, but two, also just trying to like get reps looking at all of these deals
Right.
so I can understand them inside and out.
So that's the beginning, and now you're in a principal role, and so you're more in the field, and it's a little bit higher level?
I say it's just like a different experience. And now we've got folks that are maybe call it newer out of MBAs that they're doing the modeling, kind of learning the business, kind of helping kind of create, value and create structure around these deals that we're looking at. And yeah, maybe where I am now, 13, 15 years into this, I guess call it my development career, it's a lot of time with people, and it's a lot of time, looking at sites, and a lot of times going to design meetings and meeting with owners and kind of getting involved in communities and being on, chamber boards and bid boards.
Yeah, and making a project
And
happen.
it's a little bit more, yeah, it might be a little bit more kind of outside of the office, but you really have to have both because I feel like what I'm always struggling with and always trying to like kind of get to is putting a little structure around my day and around how we progress these projects
Right.
because I'm always kind of flying around. It's kind of funny you notice that. Um, so I kind of crave having a little bit of structure so I don't feel like I'm
Sure.
flailing in the
Yeah.
wind. And I do that kind of with the team that I work with the office that I'm a part of, and with the projects that I work on. I'm really always trying to kind of keep things in front of me.
Got it.
And it just takes
Got it.
time because you're
Yeah. So what I was going at with the tennis is when we hit, you gave me a tip. I know you were a pro and you've coached a lot of people, and I wasn't paying you for a lesson, but just as a friend, like we hit, and you dropped one simple tip to me, which was work really, really hard in preparation to hit the shot. You're hustling, you're moving, you're really moving those legs, and you're doing all the work and all the energy to get in the position and then once you start to swing for the shot, it's the opposite. Everything's relaxed and you just sort of let it just happen naturally. And so I wonder, like, is that a little bit of the method in your work? You're rushing around, you're hustling, and you're really doing all the work and all the prep, working the late night hours, and then at a certain point, like maybe you are with the San Pedro project, now that you spent all the time and you got the right, you know, um, consultant with the retail and had the loading docks, so now you've done all that work. Now you can sit back and you can just take that swing naturally.
Um, I'm flattered you remembered that. I think I was talking about, yeah, keep your your footwork intense, and then yeah, when you get there, kind of let that arm kind of come through a little bit more naturally. It's actually a great analogy, call it. And and I'm a New York Knicks fan, by the way, but I think of Kobe Bryant, and he gets credit for this idea of like he put so much work in that when he got to the game or the big shot, he'd done it so many times that he was relaxed about it.
Yeah.
I think that's a I think that's something that we can all kind of strive for is that like there's so much preparation and so much work that goes into putting the right people in the right places and making sure there's enough structure that like you can make a partner feel comfortable that you've got it under control.
Yeah.
So you kind of put all this leg work in, all this footwork in that's really intense, just so maybe when you walk into a meeting, you're not nervous
Right.
because you've done all this work, you've done so much preparation that when you get there, it's actually relatively um, not anxious to talk about it and have it come from a place of real kind of like knowledge, wisdom, because you've done the work.
I love
And
it.
there's just something magical about doing the work and what that creates in you and kind of what folks perceive from you once you've done the work. And I think like just having like authenticity, which comes from, in development, these projects take 7, 8, 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So you really, how can you be good at something until you've done a few of them, right? And all of a sudden, unless you've been working in a field for 15 years, you really haven't seen it from start to finish a
Right.
few times. So I think those are the kinds of things that this is the part of the reason I kind of like working for Trammell Crow Company, because I'm working with folks who've been doing it for 20, 30 years, and oh my goodness, like the wisdom they have, the experience they have, the
Right.
question they have that seems so subtle and simple, but has so many ramifications. It's kind of mind
And that
blowing.
only comes from that
And then only
experience.
comes from having done it, probably having been burned a few times, and you're like, hey, I'm never going to get burned again. But it really just comes from putting in the work, so you can be in a position to like let things hopefully kind of come naturally, and then you can just be present and
Yes.
like adjust.
Right.
We just made an adjustment in our project in San Pedro where I felt like we were having an optic where our units, the feedback from some prospects was that they felt tight in the
Yeah.
living room,
Sure.
and this was like 2 weeks into leasing, and we were like, well, why were we getting that piece of feedback? Why is it happening a lot? And I think the reason was I was kind of talking with the leasing staff that are there every day is because our model unit was actually a much bigger unit for our one bedroom. And I think they would walk into the model and it would be really big and spacious with all this great furniture. And then the immediate contrast was walking into a smaller one bedroom unit. And that contrast of seeing all this space,
Right.
it felt smaller. So we made a real big quick pivot, and we just made our model one of the smaller one bedrooms, kind of showed how easily it was
Right.
to
And
furnish
then
it.
it feels better. Right.
And we developed these sizes of units before, and we knew they lived well, and almost instantaneously we were getting way better feedback, and
Love it.
and we were renting more
I love it.
bedrooms.
Good. I love it. Well, to wrap this up, wanted, to that, touch on, you know, the future and where it's going, right? So where do you picture yourself in 3 years?
I picture myself hopefully back in my newly renovated house, still working at Trammell Crow Company, still focused on finding, uh, building, leasing, great apartment communities in places that we and that I am excited to go visit, a few times a week.
Great. Excellent. Okay. And then in closing, what's it all for? What's your one thing? Why are you doing this?
I'm always kind of trying to figure that out, and it's probably changed over the years. Right now, I'm probably in a place where I've been working in commercial real estate for 15 years. I still love it. Working in Trammell Crow Company, I guess my 13th year now. I think I really like the people I work with, which makes things much easier.
Yeah.
And I really like the communities that we're going into. I feel like a real personal um connection, but like a personal responsibility to like deliver like a great project, because these people have been in these neighborhoods for like 40 years and they care. So I think I just like being part of the community that I live in and that I work in. I've been in LA 20 years now. I definitely am a diehard New York sports fan, but I love living in LA. So I'm really focused on just, kind of um spending time with and energy with and being present with folks like you, my new tennis club, my new tennis buddy, and my friends out here and my family and the folks that I work with, and just trying to be kind of present with them, look them, in the eye like I'm looking you in the eye right now, and kind of create a great life for myself and my family and my friends. That's a big priority for me right now. Life is short, too short, oftentimes. So just trying to enjoy it. And I find this kind of being grounded, at least for me, kind of, much like maybe putting the work in, it allows you to kind of relax a little bit. So I feel good when I'm around people that I care about and care about me. So it's been a
Love it.
nice focus, call it.
Awesome, man. Well, great conversation.
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Sunday morning, I'm going to go play tennis right now.
All right. I want you to win.
I hope so. All right. Thanks, Ari.